Welcome back to Art 368, Introduction to Video Projection Mapping. We're currently focusing on Millumin, a really amazing video mapping software out of France. Today's lesson, we are going to focus on the dashboard and the timeline and all of its amazing features. Really important to kind of get a hold on all the features that these two systems have. And I think this is actually one of the strongest parts of Melumin is that it actually offers both. That it offers you this sort of like traditional VJ video stack switching mode. And then it also offers you a linear timeline mode for folks that are doing more digital storytelling, more things for theater, things that have to be on a queue list, all of that fun stuff. So let's see where we can go. First off, I've got kind of a folder here of some video. So I'm going to go ahead and drag in, bring in some older clips here that I've got. Some ones of, I think these are birds. Oh, actually, those ones are so old it wants to convert them. So that didn't work out so well, but let's try a different one here. So I got to move that over for a second. Let's try some newer clips then. Let's go with these big waves. That works. And this clouds folder as soon as it's done importing those. Melumin was having a little trouble with that, but we've got them now, big waves. And let's go ahead and bring in, actually it might have grabbed the birds. I'm not sure if there's anything in there, but I think it at least made the folder. And I'll grab this one with clouds in it. All right, cool. So I've got some video to work with. Yeah, birds was empty, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that from my library. Or actually, I have to right-click, remove. But I have a nice folder of some 1080p big waves from the California coast and some 1080p clouds from a flight that I did. All right, so let's start with the dashboard. That's what comes up by default in Melumin. And with dashboard, I'm talking about this whole area down at the bottom, the big horizontal area. And we've gone over this in some of the intro lessons about how you can set up these various columns. You can also set up multiple layers. So the first thing we want to do is create a layer. And then I can go ahead and drag one of these clips down. And, you know, as we can see, let me turn down, some of these have volume up on them. So I just want to go ahead and, there we go. We'll turn down the volume on that. I have a nice 1080p setting here. It looks like as far as output goes, I have a very high, I'm basically hooked up to a dual display right now instead of a projector. So my cinema display is 2560 by 1440, which is just fine. We'll go ahead and leave that there. It's definitely more than 1080p. It's not full 4K or anything like that, but that's why the 1080p footage is not filling up my whole frame, right? But I could bring in lots of other clips. So as we know, if I bring in another clip into, say, column 2, then as I play column 1, that does that. And then if I play column 2, it switches to the next clip, right? And I can go back and forth, and I can set these up with lots of clips, lots of different ones, each one switching as I go. And it's just nice because you know, I can set up an order of clips and move from there. Now, however, if I happen to scale this, you can see it's going to scale the whole layer. So if I want to scale that up and fill my whole frame, you'll now notice when I go to these other clips, they're all scaled as well, right? Now, that's because they're all on the same layer. I've showed you in the past we could move these, like I could have 4 different layers, and then if I hit this Edit Board button, I can move these individually. So I can move that one to there, that one to there, and that one to there. And now you'll see as I go through, those guys remain small, and this one is big, right? But there is also this other feature that we could do, and that's inside some of these layer controls. So again, I turned on the edit board because it opens up some additional features. Not only does it allow me to click on individual clips and kind of play around with some of their controls. You'll see over here on the right, each of those now has controls of whether or not they'll loop infinitely, just once, stop at the end, or auto follow one into the next. I can also play with the speed of each of those clips, and I can play with their audio routing. Like I could take their volume down on each of those if I wanted to. But it also opens up, you can see it opens up just below the play button and the stop button here, it opens up these little transition areas with a gear icon, right? So this is one of my favorite things to do when using the dashboard, is to add a little bit of a transition. So under transition, there's smooth, there's linear, there's manual, but smooth gives me a nice little kind of like fade to it. So if I say put in a 4-second smooth transition, you'll see instead of no transition, it now says 4 seconds. I'll do the same on each of these. I'll do 4 seconds, 4 seconds, and 4 seconds. And now as I do that, I get a nice little soft fade from one to the other. So maybe you don't want that hard cut. Maybe you want a nice fade in between each shot. And you can see it even like animates that little orange square kind of fading one into the next, right? But that also works with this other feature you might have seen when I was in there setting it. One of the cool features you can do is there's this whole save current state feature. There's a little thing here that says this will store the state of all layers into this column. Then you can launch this column and these values will be played automatically. What that means is it's kind of a way of overriding the fact that, like, if I scale something or change the opacity, that it does it to the whole layer. You can make it just affect columns, individual columns, instead of layers, right? So again, if I click on this clip here and I fade the opacity back, it's now faded the opacity back for every layer. Every layer is at 32%, right? But I'll go ahead and put that back up. But if I instead click on this little plus sign next to the layer and I say, okay, I want to control opacity, and it's kind of like setting a keyframe, a rudimentary version of that. If you're familiar with other editing software, it's not quite the same, but, and then I can also, I'll do one for scale and position, right? So you can do it for whatever you want to do. There's lots of different things here. So right off the bat, I can now click on this guy and I can say, let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and scale this one. Now all of them are going to scale, but you'll see after I do one, if I click on this icon and say save current state, position, scale, and say I could even do opacity a little bit on that one and do it again, save current state. And you'll see it now lists 48% opacity, position, it has in pixel marks, and scale at 98%. Now if I click on this clip, obviously it did it the first time, but now I could set this one differently. I could say no, put this one at 100% opacity, scale this one back up, and let's move it down a little bit, and then click on that one and say save current state. Now, when I click between them, it actually animates them, which is really kind of cool, right? So not only does it save the state, but it creates this, like, with that transition that I have in there, it actually animates them. If you don't have the transition, it'll just make a hard jump from one state to the other. But using that 4-second transition, it's actually kind of like almost like an animation, a rudimentary animation tool that takes it down in opacity, position, and scale, which is really kind of cool to be able to do in these layer stacks. So same thing now, I could go to this one. This one took on the last same size and opacity as the last one. So okay, I can leave that at 100%, but maybe I want to like move this up here and say save current state, right? As you can see, it's got very different settings on the position than these other ones. Everything else is pretty much the same. Maybe I will, scale is 54%, that's fine. So now, boom, I can have it animate up and go into that position, and then fade back and go into that position. So it's a really cool way to kind of set all these different positions, scales. You know, it can't do everything, but it has quite a few features that you can add onto here. Rotation, it has a mapping control, so you can actually change the mapping over time. I haven't done media transition yet. I'll have to look into that one, the TR media transition. We'll get there. And then there's some like speed controls on the various clips as well. So you can kind of set the speed or loop modes, or looks like audio volume you can control, loop mode you can control, and speed you can control, which is just great. So really nice feature there, right? So just to go over, you have the save state. You've got this. You can also give titles on each one if you want to. You can like title each of these columns just different things. So right now it's like set at number 1, I think. But if I give this like Q number 1, let's see where that shows up. There it is. Now it's actually labeled queue number 1, queue number 2. So you can really set this up to go to one position, then go to the next position, onward and onward. And once we get to this, we're not going to go over today, there's also light cues that you can bring into here, because this software can do DMX lighting control as well. So some pretty cool features there. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you also have an option here to do a copy layer. So this will continuously copy content onto another layer, which is really cool. There's also light controls, data controls, DMX controls. But I can make a copy of that layer, and it will actually make a perfect copy of that layer, which is kind of fun, right? So I think if I move that off over here, obviously my screens aren't quite big enough for it, but it's not doing the same transition work. It doesn't look like it can handle quite that on the copy layer, but it's probably just because I haven't set those tracks up yet. If I had done the tracks the same way, it really just copied the content. So as I fade one to the next, it has the content there. It doesn't copy the animation. So I probably would have just had to make that copy layer before I added all that animation. So that didn't come with it. So you might have to do all the little like transition things, but it'll make a duplicate of that layer. And my experience with that is that they don't take up as much processing power when you have that, which is kind of cool. So it looks like that one's going to go back because I set a position on it. But pretty neat stuff. And you can create a duplicate of one layer right next to another. All right, so that's what that is. I'll go ahead and delete that layer. Also, just a few things. You can turn visibility off for a layer by clicking the eye, and you can lock a layer at any point. And you can also fold this layer up so you don't have to see all that stuff. If I turn off edit board, it kind of hides all that inside anyway. So it's up to you whether you want to see all that extra detail or not. Let's see. We can also add additional columns here over on the right. This like yellow plus sign allows me to go ahead and add up to like, as many columns as I want. I can also kind of zoom in on my columns or zoom out and give myself more space, make them smaller. So these controls are nice. And this is sort of a master stop for all of them. That just kind of stops all layers at the same time, which is nice, right? And then when I'm ready, I can go ahead and start back up again. So now you have this sort of like master stop button over here on the right. And this is also, I forgot, extra little feature there. There's a little guy over here that does, it's like a little time menu. And we'll get into this down the road with cues and things like this. But you can actually like pause things, move through them, scrub through specific layers to where you want to be. It's a really nice little feature over here. There's counter, time elapsed, all sorts of different stuff that you can have going on each of these layers. It kind of shows you where you're at. So if I turn on, it actually gives me like how much time is left on that transition. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just kind of looping. I go to this one. Here we go. Gives me the full length before it loops back over again. So some nice features that you have here. Again, I could pause the clip with the master control there. So that's this little time feature over here on the right. Normally it's hidden away, but if you hit the little gray arrow, that pops out as well. So just like you to understand everything that's kind of available to you as you're working here. Let's see. The other thing we can do is we can actually, under this dashboard tab here, just to the right, there's like a little gray arrow. You can create multiple dashboards. So I can create a second board there, which is cool. And then I can go back to the original board. So, it's cool because if, you want to create a whole nother set with different dashboards to control through, you can do that. And you can create as many as you want. As you can see here, we can just keep adding to the list and go back to number 1 or go to each of these ones and have a whole different setup. So you can make a really big project with multiple dashboards like that. Beyond that, this is just kind of like lists to filter. We'll get into that later on. And you can search for specific named cues and things like that. All right, so that's a good little overview of the dashboard there. Let's see, what else can we get into? So next we're going to talk about the timeline. I just, in case you're wondering what I did, I just turned on the info button over here to kind of see some of the lengths of some of these clips as I'm pulling them over, which ones are longer and shorter. So the timeline feature is just to the right of the dashboard tab. If I click on timeline, obviously the dashboard kind of fades back. This is very similar now to a Adobe Premiere, Final Cut Pro, After Effects. It really reminds me of like it's been modeled after After Effects in a lot of ways. So how does it work? Okay, well, same thing. Let's go ahead and drag down a clip, right? So I'm going to come up here. Let's grab this 56-second long Blackmagic. Cool. So you can see it actually gives me the full length, 56 seconds on a timeline here. I can actually, say where I want to go on the timeline. I can say I want to go to like 45 seconds. I want to go all right to the beginning at like 5 seconds in. I can type that in, right? If I hit the play button, I can play through it. I can also just hit spacebar to stop and start again. If I want to change the overall length, like right now, this is I think this is defaulted at 3 minutes. Under the setup button down here at the bottom, I can determine how long my overall duration is. So I could say that no, this is 10 minutes long. Now you can see it just shrunk down in size, right? Because it's a lot bigger now. I have 10 minutes on my timeline to work with. That being said, I can zoom in and out on the timeline. I wish the scroll allowed me to zoom in and out, but I have to use right now kind of plus and minus to zoom in and out and see the details. So that's over here in the bottom right corner. I can also, now that I have a clip here, obviously I can move it around to any position on the timeline I want. I can turn on and off its visibility. I can lock the layer so it can't be messed with. But I can also drag out a clip or shorten a clip. So very similar on the shorten the clip. It's kind of like you're just trimming the out point on it, and I can also trim the in point on it of where it begins and where it ends, right? Which is cool. However, I can drag beyond, and you'll see it turns like these segments now, where it's like a little light orange, dark orange, light orange. It just continuously loops, which I think is a cool feature. I'd actually love to see that in like Premiere and After Effects, that you could just have it like automatically loop back to the beginning again and keep going and going and going. Because sometimes you just want to have more of the same footage, right? Now, obviously, if there's a jump at the beginning, you're going to see that jump, so keep that in mind. Up here in the top, you'll see there's a split media right here. I can actually cut it and trim it into 2 pieces. So that's like using the razor tool in Premiere or After Effects. There's also audio routing. I could turn down the volume. I could also play with the start and end points right there as well. Let's see if that shows up. I guess it doesn't really show up. Yeah, it doesn't really show up. Let me see if it affects the end point in the... Yeah, I wish it did, but it doesn't show up right there. So I could say start point, start 5 seconds in, and end point, or actually it's only 56 seconds. So let's go to like, let's start point at, that's interesting. Oh, you know what? I think it's working with frames maybe instead of seconds. I'll have to look into that a little bit more, but let's see. I was just trying to play around with that. Did not like that. Well, let's undo. So we'll click on that. So anyway, if I come up there, so it's starting at 0. Oh, you know what? I had put the start point at 56 seconds. That's why. So let's say the start is at 5 seconds. There we go. And then the end is at 35. Did that change my overall length? I think it did. Yep, I think so. So somewhat, that's a little strange. It should have been 30 seconds long, I would think. Anyway, I'll have to play around with that. It's definitely less than it was before. Oh, you know, it's because it was looping. I take that back. So when I brought that down to 35, you'll see how that turned to light orange. And that's why. Then I could trim it up, and that would be 5 and 35, which would take it down to about 30 seconds. That'd be right. Okay, cool. So you've got to pay attention to that orange coloring on the layer there. So anyway, long story short, you have some ability to control all of that, to split the layer, to have some fun here. But the most important part is that I can continue to build this out, right? You know, I can drag all sorts of clips. I could keep this all on one layer if I want to, or I could add additional layers, right? And I could move these around a little bit. These don't drag as easy. I wish they did. I think I can cut it and paste it though. So that works out well. So if I create another layer there, and then I can cut it, I'm doing Command X, and then come to that layer, move my cursor to where I want it, and paste it. And so I can have boom, 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 one clip going into the next. I prefer to have them on other layers like that because then I can do some really nice transitions on them as well. That being said, I want to try something. We're going to see and paste it here. Yeah, I didn't think so. I have yet to have a cool kind of like transition effect happen, so we're going to do some transitions though. So the powerful thing on timelines is that we can also do keyframing on these as well. And that's what this button is, keyframes and segments. So if I click on that, right off the bat, if I click on this little segment area, this just determines whether it loops the timeline back to the beginning again, whether it plays once, all sorts of things like that. And so you can kind of like name this. Right now it's just named segment, but whatever you want to call it. And you can split this up and remove segments and do all sorts of different things. But right now, we'll leave it how it is. And we have now activated timelines. When you turn that off, you'll notice, and when you turn that back on, over on each layer, there's a little plus sign that appears inside of a circle. So say I come down to this first layer and I click on that, I can say, let's go ahead and let's add an opacity and a scale. And you'll now see below it, here's an opacity and a scale, right? So I could say, right at the beginning, let's go ahead and set an opacity clip. And now if I zoom in down here, I always like to zoom in just like we would in an editing software. You'll see when I hit that little diamond button, I get a diamond right at the beginning, right? That diamond has a value. I could set that to 0 right now. And now I have 0% opacity, right? And if I say then go to, say, roughly 3 seconds, I could hit diamond again and bring this one up to 100. And now if I bring to the beginning and I hit the space bar, there we go. I get a nice fade up in opacity, right? I could also do on each of these, I can kind of come back here and you'll see there's easing modes. So this is sort of like ease in, easy ease, which is like in and out, or just like linear. So I could have it ease out and be a little bit slower on the ease out and then have it speed up, right? Sorry, I was trying to move that for a second. You'll notice it changed to an arrow when I did that. So I could always click on that guy again and say the opposite. Start really slow and then speed up. So the arrow kind of points to that, right? So, or I could do an ease in, ease out, which is the easy ease in and out. So you have some options there. The cool thing is too, I can copy and paste these. I can copy that guy and paste it, and then copy this guy at the beginning. I'm doing Command C, and then go to the end and paste that. And so as it's playing through now, I have a fade out happen, right? And this is where it's cool for the next layer. If I line those up, you'll see if I hold down Shift, I get these little alignment bars, which is really nice. Then I could do the same thing. I could come on here, and I could put an opacity in. I'm basically creating a manual like cross dissolve. So then I could set this guy, create an opacity keyframe, come up to the keyframes value up here, set that at 0, and then come in here, set that to 100. Maybe I give it a nice ease in feature. I might have, yeah, I got to set that one back. Sorry about that, guys. Let me put that back to 0. I thought I had hit the keyframe button. I'm going to go ahead and save. And now I get a dissolve of one into the next, right? So I can have one fade out while the other fades in on top of it. I don't have to have both. I could get rid of these keyframes underneath and just have one fade on top of the other. So it can be one comes in on top of the other. The other way, sometimes you have a little bit of like a fade out where it almost goes to black before it comes back up again. But it's an easy way to start making little transitions from one to the next. Easy way to do fade in, fade out as well using these. But it doesn't just have to be that. You know, I could come to the next clip and have a hard transition where one just cuts right to the next. But maybe this one, I set a different kind of keyframe. Maybe this guy, I set a scale, right? And so maybe I set one keyframe at the beginning of the clip. I'll go ahead and move that over. And by the halfway point, maybe I increase quite a bit. And hit another keyframe. And then have it come back down again by the end. Here we go. Cut to the clip. Oop, you know what? I think I messed that up. Let me put that back at 100% for that one. There we go. I can have all sorts of controls going on. And then it's going to fade back down, starting now. And controlling that scale and position, you could do all sorts of different controls on your layer, right? All right. So it doesn't just end there. We have all sorts of things. There's mapping controls. So again, you can keyframe the mapping of your objects. I wish there was a mask keyframing, but I haven't found that yet. That'd be cool to be able to animate the masks. But you can animate the mapping. You can rotation, position, opacity, blend modes, and then there's movie speed and volume as well that you can bring in there. And they keep seeming to add more options in there in the future. So there's just lots of different things you can do. So nothing like being able to keyframe. And then if you want to take it one step further, there's curves. So, you know, anybody that's used to using a line editor for their keyframing, this really allows you some potential here to have some fun and play kind of in a different way, controlling the curves. So it just depends on what you prefer, just straight looking at straight keyframes, or whether you want the curves. That is up to you. I can, obviously, if I hit Option, I can turn these what was a linear curve into a easable curve. It doesn't have Bezier handles the way some fine editing software does. I wish it did in curve mode. Maybe they will in the future. But it still allows you to see a visual representation of how your fades are happening. You know, that ease out is going to start there. If I keep clicking on it, that went to the ease in, ease out. So it's going to start slow, then speed up, and then slow down again, right? So I can kind of hit Option and click through all of these modes from linear back to diamond, whichever one you want to particularly work with at that time. You can do the same thing up here in the top right, but again, just a visual representation of it with curves. Let's see. I think that's it. Same thing under here. You do have copy layers you can do. Lights and data and DMX, that's all stuff we'll get to in future lessons. I think that's it for now. Yeah, so a really powerful combination. You can have multiple timelines, which is great. As you can see up here, as I create a timeline, the timeline actually gets added to my library, which is really cool. So I could always hit another timeline, and now there's timeline 2, right? So if I want to, with timeline 2, I believe I can do, if I create another layer, yes, you can do nested timelines as well. So this is like the same thing in After Effects or in Premiere of doing a nested sequence. So I can actually have one sequence inside of another sequence inside of another sequence, which opens up all sorts of, you know, kind of parent-child relationship combinations that you can do. You know, I could have everything that's going on inside of timeline 1, but then in timeline 2, I have the whole thing scaling and rotating and doing fun stuff on its own, you know, while I have transitions going on inside of it in timeline 1. So keep that in mind, that the timelines can also be nested inside of other timelines, which is a really powerful feature. All right. I think that is enough for this lesson right now. You know what? I will add one more. This isn't so much on a timeline as there is an effect feature that allows you. So this will be a good example of how, you know, as I scroll through this, we have our different transitions that I did there. Did it scaled up and back down and all that fun stuff, right? That's what's going on in timeline 1. But in timeline 2, if I click on this layer and I come down to effects over on the right here, if you click on it and you go down, you'll see under advanced there's actually some animation effects. There's an auto rotate and an auto scale. So if I do auto scale, it's kind of fun, and I play it, you'll see it does this little like auto scale bouncing that's going on right now, right? There's the auto scale. So I can speed that, slow that way down. It doesn't work in every situation, right? You know, it just depends on how much you want to do. And I can determine like how big it's going to get within that scale. It's almost like a masking that's happening inside of the scale, the boundaries of that original frame. But I could slow this way down. I could say, let's do this at like 1 instead of 7. Actually, let's go to like 0.5. And then that's kind of doing it on a sine wave. I could do a cosine, which is going to be a little different, a triangle, a sawtooth. So these are using sort of like um, some different little algorithm oscillating speed modes that allow things to kind of go up and down, up and down. But I could also add, like on top of a scale, I could add a auto rotate. So let me go back here so you can actually see something. And you can see it's like slowly rotating. I have it set on 1 right now. I could speed that up a little bit if I wanted to. And go back to the auto scale. Let's get that all the way back up to 1 again. So, you know, if I zoomed in on the layer, you could have some fun stuff going on. So I just like to show that there are some animation effects going on. Obviously, whoa, that's a little intense on the scale there. So maybe I want to go to like 0.2 just to slow that down a little bit. And maybe the scale needs to come back down a bit. Maybe it doesn't need to go quite that large. To be honest, I rarely use these automated effects on video layers. I often use them on still photo layers to almost do sort of a Ken Burns style pan and zoom effect into them and just have it automated over time. So that can be kind of a nice feature. So yeah, I think that is a good place to stop for now. Lots of different ways to animate a layer, working with timelines, and then of course working back with our dashboard if you prefer this kind of layer stack method. All right, that's it for today's lesson. Hope that helps you understand this whole kind of control layer of Melumin a bit more. Play around, let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for tuning in.